All right, we'll just let folks enter for a moment. I'll get this also going on our YouTube channel. All right. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Morgan, and I'm an event manager at Politics and Prose, and I'd like to welcome you all to PNP Live. Soon, I will drop a link in the chat for where you can order a copy of Sinister Graves, the third book in the Cash Blackbear mystery series, straight from PNP's website. You can ask our speakers a question tonight by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try to get to as many of those questions as we can towards the end of the program, but we apologize in advance if we don't have time to address your question. Also, there are auto captions for this event by hitting the live caption button at the bottom of your screen as well. Let's introduce tonight's guest. Marcie R. Rendon is an enrolled member of the White Earth Nation, a Pinckley Prize-winning author, playwright, poet, freelance writer, and a community arts activist. Rendon was awarded the McKnight Distinguished Artist Award for 2020. She is a speaker on Native issues, leadership, and writing. Her second novel in her Cash Blackbear mystery series, Girl Gone Missing, was nominated for the Sue Grafton Memorial Award. Rendon was recognized as a 50 over 50 changemaker by the Minneapolis AARP and Pollen in 2018. She currently lives in Minneapolis. Rendon will be in conversation with Angeline Boulley, an enrolled member of the Salt Sweet Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians, a storyteller who writes about Ojibwe. I'm so sorry. How do I pronounce that?
Ojibwe.
I'm sorry.
Ojibwe.
Ojibwe community in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. She is a former director of the Office of Indian Education at the U.S. Department of Education. Angeline lives in Southwest Michigan, but her home will always be on Sugar Island. Firekeeper's Daughter is her debut novel and was an instant #1 New York Times bestseller. We asked give our guests a virtual round of applause.
Yay. Bonjour, Anine, Marcie.
Bonjour.
Yes. So you and I have known each other for a few years. We met for the first time in person at Quayle Color of Children's Literature Conference in April of 2018. So it was a year before I got my agent. And just wonderful, just so wonderful to meet you in person, because I had followed you on social, on Twitter, and I followed you on some other things. And so to meet you in person, I just remember being in awe and fangirling you, because yes, I knew I was in the presence of greatness.
Oh, thank you so much. That's embarrassing, but thank you.
Well, I want to start out by sharing what my dad thinks about your writing. So my dad, Henry Boulley, he's a firekeeper in our community, and for other communities, he helps out. And I remember the first time I read Murder on the Red River, and I gave him the book and said, you have to read this. And he did. And he said, this author writes the way that Anishinaabe people see the world. That your descriptions and the way you see things, he could tell you where Anishinaabe, it came through in your writing, in your descriptions, in the way that the story unfolded. And really, I can't think of any higher compliment to share with you than to start with that. So miigwech, and congratulations for the attention you are so rightly getting for your Cash Blackbear mystery series.
Yeah, thank you. Thank your dad for me. Someday I will actually get to meet him. I know that we tried to show up in the same space, and it just hasn't happened yet since that Quality conference. Yeah.
Yes. Was it last summer or the summer before? We were going to do our own like DIY writers workshop. Marcie was going to come to my house. I live about an hour away from Chicago, and I have a guest bedroom with a desk and everything was all set up. And we were going to spend all day in our rooms writing. And then in the evening, we would fix dinner. And our plan was to sit and talk about our work. And it was going to be our own little, writer's retreat.
Exactly. Right.
And right before it, there was some COVID things that were happening close to you. And so we did it virtually instead.
Right.
And it was still a great experience. But I know that the in-person, to get back to that, I think we're all just so, any opportunity we can.
Yeah. Yeah. And, COVID threw a curveball to everybody in lots of different ways. And for me, it gave me time to literally sit alone and write. But there's something about being able to connect, like at the Quali conference or other native gatherings of writers. There's
Mhm.
something that happens where things, ideas spark, and, you get to meet other amazing people who are also trying to do this thing that we're all doing. And so hopefully as things shift, we'll get to do more of that. I know you've been traveling.
Yes, the foreign editions of my books are coming out. And so I was able to spend a month in Europe and
Wow. Wow.
got back a week ago. And so, yeah, it's been great. But I want to get at, tell us how this inspiration for Cash Blackbear, how this came to you. I'm always so fascinated in the story behind the story.
Um, so I have been trying to write crime ever since I decided that, I was going to write novels, write crime. And so I have like 3 crime novels that are in my garage that are really super bad. Like I was trying to write crime. It was like I was trying, and I knew they were duds. I finished them, but I knew they were duds. And so I was going to try to write a fluff novel, which I don't read fluff novels anyways, but I thought, well, I'm failing at crime. I'm going to write this. And so I'd started to write a story about a young girl who goes to Nashville to try and break into the music industry. Why that? I don't know where that idea came from, but so I was trying to write that, and Cash just kind of appeared over here, and she was like, "Oh, no, no, no." And this whole other story started to come, and as long as I was writing the story, I could tell that it was working. And I mean, that's how Cash Blackbear like sort of came into existence in my mind. And wrote Murder on the Red River, had the idea for book 2, went with Girl Gone Missing, and by the time I was done with Girl Gone Missing, I was ready to write Sinister Graves, and by the time I was done with Sinister Graves, I started to write book 4, and that's what I'm working on now. And it's the same character. I mean, she's a real gift in that I never anticipated the reaction that readers would have to her or to my writing. It's like readers who have read the whole series, they're almost, it's like they're convinced that she's real.
Mhm.
And, like they're concerned about her drinking, they're
Yeah.
concerned about her smoking. They just like, is she doing okay in school? And it's like, I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't even know if she's going to stay in school because I'm just writing the story. I'm not planning the story, if that makes sense. Like I don't have a plot here that I'm.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense to me. It also scares me because I want to know that I'm going to be able to read all about Cash, like continuing on. I want this like a long-term arc. I want to, because what fascinates me about Cash Blackbear, so Renee Blackbear, and she's nicknamed Cash because she works for for Cash
Right.
on these farms and driving these rigs, and the mix of such strength and vulnerability that you've managed to have Cash, where she just tugs at your heartstrings. You know she can take care of herself, but you still, all that auntie in you just worries and wants to like give her a hot meal and like, give her a talking to about some of her choices in men. And, like I want to go all auntie on Cash.
I just
So
talked at the Madison Book Festival, and one of the people in the audience during question and answer time said, "Is she ever going to eat real food?" Like, this girl has got to eat more. I was like, well,
yeah,
she tuna sandwiches, and she has roast beef sandwiches with Wheaton once in a while, you know?
that brings me to another point. So for people, if you, certainly start with Murder on the Red River and continue on, but I want to talk about some of these secondary characters that also just Sheriff Wheaton. So maybe you could tell our viewers a little bit about Sheriff Wheaton and his relationship with Cash, and how that's playing out in these stories.
You know, the backstory with Cash is that she was in foster care in the 50s and 60s, and Wheaton was the county sheriff, and he actually helped her, and somehow they developed a mentor-mentee relationship kind of thing. Um, and so, when other people have asked me about Wheaton, all I can think of is that every single one of us during hard times in our lives, we've wanted somebody to be there that was
Mhm.
just kind in our direction. And Wheaton seems to play that role in Cash's life, where there's he has no agenda. He's just there because he cares about her and wants her to do well. I mean, he's set it up so that she goes to college, etc. Um, and again, because I'm not plotting these books, I didn't I didn't know that Wheaton was going to show up, until the story started to develop. Um, and I think you're right that, like, the books are written so that you can read Sinister Graves without ever having read the first two. Um, and maybe there's more backs, like if you read all three of them, there would be more information that you'd have, but really they're standalone novels that you can read without having read like one, two, three.
Right, right. And I think, but what's interesting is to see the progression of their friendship, being more than just a person looking out for her. There's a meeting of the minds and equality to their friendship,
Mm-hmm.
that it feels really good to me. And for young women to have a man in their corner
Mm-hmm.
who does not see them as a sexual being, but is
Right,
cheering them on for their success,
right.
that is it's such a wonderful thing. And thank you for giving us that relationship with the sheriff and with Cash.
Hmm. People don't get that kind of, again, it's that kind of, life is hard and people are takers and users. And so I think it's one of the pieces. I mean, like, and I've said this to so many people, like, if I'm trying to do anything, there's two things. One, give Native people a picture of ourselves. We're here, we exist. This is, we're good. Um, and then the other is to, like, there's so much talk about historical trauma, generational trauma, and it happened. The oppression has happened, it continues to happen, But the fact is that I really believe that we're more resilient than we are traumatized. And I think that Cash embodies that. And like you said earlier, she is vulnerable. And she should, in an ideal world, she would be able to be vulnerable without issue. But
Mhm.
because of oppression and because of all of the other sexism, classism, racism, she ends up in situations where she really does have to take care of herself.
Mhm.
Um, so she's resilient. There's that deep, deep vulnerability, but she's resilient and she's determined to just, keep going
Right,
and do better,
right.
you know, help people, be
So,
kind, compassionate.
yes, share with us what maybe the pitch for Sinister Graves is, because people can jump right into the series and start with Sinister Graves.
You want like my elevator pitch? I am
Yeah, like,
terrible at those things.
oh,
Angeline, I just like I was saying to someone,
um,
I have never gotten a writing job because of a query. That's how bad I am. It's like
oh,
the book is done, the article is done, the whatever, it's done here. Do you want it or not? Sinister Graves, the idea for it formed years and years ago. I was traveling across Idaho through the mountains, and there's nothing. There's like for this half a day there was nothing. So we stopped at this roadside graveyard, and there was a white graveyard and a native graveyard. And we were looking at the headstones in the Indian graveyard, and there was this beautiful, like Yellow Horse or American Whirlwind Soldier, whatever, there was Indian names over here. And I walked over into the non-native graveyard, and there was a family grave, and there was I can't remember if it was 3 or 5 children's graves who had all died like almost at 2 years of age. And I just immediately got cold, and I called my friends over. I said, "Look at this. These babies were all killed." And they're like, "No, no, it was the Spanish flu." I said, "Wrong dates for the Spanish flu."
mhm,
And in these isolated rural areas, all kinds of things can happen. And because it's so isolated, people can literally get away with murder.
right,
And in my mind, what I was seeing was, like a mother in an isolated community with postpartum depression. Something in that. So that just sat in the back of my mind. Um, and then here in the Twin Cities, there was in the true story, number of years ago, a young mom with postpartum depression threw her babies off the bridge into the Mississippi, and it was postpartum depression. And so all of this is how the stories, I think, kind of, so all of this was going through my brain. And then, like, I believe it was President Grant way back when, who there was a they held a meeting at some Quaker center in upstate Pennsylvania, where the United States government divided up Indian country, divided up this whole continent, and gave like this group of Native people to the Presbyterians, this group of Native people to the Catholics, this group of people to the Methodists, this group of, there was 11 denominations where the government gave space for them to set up these boarding schools, Christianize Native people. And the amount of damage that has been done to our people in the name of Christianity is like a
right.
horror story in and of itself. And so,
Mhm.
like, all of this was in my brain when I wrote Sinister Graves. That is not an elevator pitch. I realize it's way too long,
Even no, it's even better. It really gets at what's going on, and the writing process is such a mystery to people outside of it, and it's so different. It's so unique to each individual writer. So I
Right.
do appreciate you sharing, like, one thought comes here, another thought comes here, and then it just kind of becomes something.
Right.
that we can then read. And the way that you put these elements together, fact-based, our history, the influence of religion, um, the, children being adopted out,
Right.
Native children taken for foster care. Um, you weave these into compelling narratives that give us a personal insight into these things, these events that we read about as history, but you put this like personal story onto it. And I think that's how history is best conveyed, is as stories that, that people live through. And so miigwech for doing what you do to shine a light on a number of issues, and that you're able to tell a story that at times the humor and the mishaps that Cash gets herself into, and other characters that she meets, and so yes, miigwech.
I'm glad. I'm glad you mentioned the humor. I mean, again, this was part of a recent conversation where somebody said, well, some parts of, you write some things that are really funny. And I'm like, I do? Like, I'm not, like, I don't know if how it is for you, but like, you can't try to do some things,
Mhm.
and I'm not what I'm trying to do is stay true to the character and stay true to our people.
Yeah.
And I think that a, a large part of who we are as Native people and the way that we've survived the different traumas that have happened to us is through our humor. And so if that comes through, that's great. That's great.
Uh, Yep. I know. I have a niece who is funny without even trying. Um, she had this dream. She was like, Papa, can I tell you about this cultural dream I had? And so she's telling my dad about this dream, and her sister, they were beating up this guy, and then they stitched him up and sent him on his way. And my dad's like, well, what was cultural about that? And she goes, we stitched him with a number 8 beating needle.
Right, right, right.
And we have, like, humorous people who are funny without even trying. And
Right.
so I love the moments of levity and that come through. um, I will say though too, you also include characters that tug at our heartstrings. And in Murder on the Red River, there's the family Cash goes to visit to
Mhm.
find out some information. She's kind of led to them,
Right.
and those children stay with you. And so
Yes.
uh, your ability to do that, have us
How
care for these kids on this reserve.
right. It's um when I started the first novel, I didn't know it was going to continue to, and like in my mind now, it's just going to keep going as long as I can keep writing. So I was not that's it's another question that people come to me with. Well, what happened to those kids from Red Lake that are in this story? And it's like, geez, I don't know yet. um, one of them does appear in Sinister Graves. He finds Wheaton because he's looking for cash, and he ends up, kind of becoming another kind of helper to Wheaton, and then plays a part in some of the stories, both in Sinister Graves.
Yeah. How many people still ask you about long braids? There's a character from the first book that oh my gosh, yeah, talk about someone that steals a scene. Yes, we have long braids, and
So many Native women want Cash to marry him. And I'm like, she cannot marry him because I'm going to have to kill him off. Or, like, I try not to control the story, but I
yeah,
really am going to have to kill him off or put him in prison because if she gets married, it it like then I can only go so far with the books, you
Mhm.
know. Um,
Uh, And I dare say that many of us have known a long braids or two
yes,
in our lifetime, and these are not the men that you typically settle down with.
they are not men who settle down. This is
They are
right.
not men who settle down, but boy, they sure are pretty.
Yes, yes. And they show up, you know, they keep returning. They're like, yeah, they show back up.
Well, I'd like to ask a question about your early writing influences and, what made you want to start writing? Were there er, books that really impacted you? What kind of led you to being this storyteller?
You know, I learned how to read and write really young. And so I started, and I was a troublemaker. And so I think that one of the things the teachers in school figured if they could just get me to sit at the back of the room and kind of write stories, I would calm down, you know, or I would be busy instead of engaging with other classmates. So, I mean, I really, since I learned how to read and write, I've been fascinated with putting words into sentences, into paragraphs, into stories. So I've written since I learned how to write, but as a native person growing up, no one told me I could grow up and be a writer. Like it was just something that I did. And
Mhm.
then we were supposed to like become teachers, social workers, doctors, lawyers, and go back and help our community. There was nothing in that narrative that said become a crime writer and tell our stories, you know.
Right.
Um, but I'd always written, and that's what I enjoyed doing. And at some point, I decided to write and try and make a living at it. And so I literally have been writing anything and everything that would pay while I was writing those initial three crappy crime novels that I told you about, and then finally wrote the first in the Cash Blackbear series. So there's the thing about writing, but then there's the business of writing.
Mhm.
You know, so when I had finished the first Cash Blackbear novel, probably the two big writers were Louise Erdrich and Sherman Alexie. And I was trying to get an agent, I was trying to get a publisher. And what was being published was either those two authors or like those romance books with the half naked guy in the front and, you know, um, or, you know, it's like there were not other Native people writing in this genre and getting published. And so I would send it, people would say, well, try this agent. And it would be somebody who was doing these Native romance kind of things. So it was like 5 years of navigating and, you know, until I found the right a publisher, found an agent, and, you know, have and am now with Soho Press and with Jackie Lipton as agent. Um, so there's the writing piece, and then there's this business piece that's a
Right.
little bit different than what my
Yes, because
life prepared me for, anyways.
yes, you and I have been having conversations about agents. Before you got your agent, I was like, Marcie, you need to have an agent. They're your business partner. They negotiate, they have these messy conversations. And then your relationship with your editor, with the publisher is about the content and not at all about the business. But you need that agent that you can trust, and they're worth every penny, and they only get paid when you do.
Yep, yep.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
you have to,
Okay.
the other thing that I tell other writers is you have to submit. You have to risk rejection. You know, I
Mhm.
had 5 years of rejection and it was like, and then I'd give up and somebody else, you know, Linda Rodriguez, she's a native author from the Southwest. She's one who just kept saying, well, just keep trying, you know, and she pointed me towards Sisters in Crime and you know, she just keep trying. And we all need that, but we also need to be putting our work out there.
Right. Right. And nowadays, with technology and there's this Native girl, Res Girls book club that, I have done online, book club discussions with them. And, there's other, writing groups online, resources online. But this brings me to a question that one of our attendees has
Okay.
posted, and it's, as a millennial, I love the absence of today's technology in the book. How important was it for the series to take place in the 1970s? Miigwech for that question too, for the attendee that did that.
I mean, again, it goes back to that thing that I was trying to write a whole nother story, and it's a character driven series, Cash Blackbear. Like it was like as I just wrote it, it developed as Cash Blackbear
But
put a
in that era, because that
but
era of the 70s, so this is like uh you know before ICWA, before the Indian Child
Right.
Welfare Act, or it, and it's
right,
like situations that are being talked about in your story are compelling reasons why we have ICWA, because so many of our children were being taken from their homes and
right,
put into non-native homes, and with the goal of getting rid of the native part of them so
right.
that they could be successful citizens of this country, but destroying so much of the community connections.
Hmm.
And so I'm very thankful that your stories are set in the 70s, because it's this glimpse into this. We think now about ICWA and current threats that are facing it. But your
Well,
story gets the origins.
that 19 that time in history, the 69, 70, early 70s, when the American movement started,
American
came
movement,
into
yes.
existence. There was a whole renaissance in Indian education. We had Vine Deloria, Scott Momaday, from my reservation, Gerald Visner. It's like there were these intellectual Indians who were writing things, and then we were reading about them in our classrooms. And then we had AIM coming in and taking over a university. It's like this was a you know, it changed everything in Indian country. We had from my reservation, Jerry Buckanaga went to Harvard, came back with a degree in education, and started the first ever Indian controlled public school for Native people on a reservation. You know,
Mhm.
AIM had the survival schools across the country. It's like it was this time of great change for us as Native people. It was before the American Indian Freedom of Religion Act. We couldn't even practice our religion back then.
Right,
It was outlawed.
right.
And so I haven't even gotten into any of that in the books. And my intention, my intention truly has been to write good crime novels. I haven't been thinking about educating people about ICWA or um, the Minnesota Indian adoption policy or, um, the American Indian Freedom of Religion Act. It's like that wasn't my intention. I was just trying to write a good murder story. And
But you're in that era when so much happened, and to
exactly.
continue writing Cash, I'm just, every single book you write, Marcie, I will be there.
Mm.
Hopefully I'll get an ARC to read it ahead of time before everybody else. But if not, I will be at the bookstores on that Tuesday, handing over my Junia to get my copy. We have another question, and please, for our attendees, feel free to use the Q&A function to submit your questions. We are not using chat. We are only using the Q&A. And this next one, Tracy writes, am I allowed to ship relationship Wheaton and Cash in my mind? She said, yes, that's facetious, but it's so clear that they care deeply for one another.
I don't understand it.
To ship is to like imagine a relationship.
Oh, oh,
That's when you ship someone.
okay.
So if anyone out there wants to ship me with your handsome, wealthy uncle, please, follow me on my social medias and
Okay, so
help an auntie out,
this must be a younger person with a new
It is.
dialogue, which is yes. Um,
Yes. They want to ship Wheaton and Cash.
I okay. No, it's not going to happen. I can tell you it's not going to happen at any point in the series because of the because of the relationship that they already have. And I
Right.
think
Because
that
it's
there's some
non-sexual. Hmm.
it's non-sexual, and I think it's really important that what you had said it earlier, that it's
Yeah.
really important for young women to have male friendships, mentors, whoever, who aren't going to violate their boundaries. And
Right.
that's not going to happen in this series.
Okay.
I know that.
May I ship Sheriff Wheaton because I would time travel and introduce myself to him. Okay, another anonymous question. What would you say are the key elements of a good crime novel? Excellent question.
So I always feel like I have to say I don't have an MFA. I've never studied writing. I've never studied crime writing. Um, for me, I read crime. I love, you know, I'm bordering on if you ask my kids, they would say I'm a compulsive reader. I just have these authors and I just read, read, read. There's something about for me, a compelling character. There's something about a when people say page turner, it's like you just keep reading because you got to know what happens next. And
Mhm.
there is something about character. Is it suspense? Or I don't even know if it's suspense. It's something about there's always something happening. There's always some forward movement that keeps you engaged in what's happening. And in a good crime novel, there's got to be a crime. In Sinister Graves, it starts out with a dead body washing up into Ada and Wheaton wanting Cash's help. And then it evolves into not just dead bodies, but these graves outside of a church. So there's crime, there's something bad has happened to somebody, and then Cash is the person who is making things right, setting things right.
Connecting the
Wow.
dots.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, a good crime novel, it can be a who done it. A lot of times it's a why done it. What led to this? How done it? How did this happen? And Cash, I appreciate the skills that she has and what she, her personal strengths and her gifts that she uses to help Wheaton solve these she solves these crimes and brings him
He
the
just kind of
information.
shows up
Yeah,
at the end.
yeah. Here, I figured this out for you, and now you can
Right.
take care of it from here. I'm not going to fill out paperwork, but you have that. Yeah.
Right.
Um, have you had people wanting to have conversation with you about the gifts that Cash has, some of the special skills that she has? Um, have you talked much about that, or is that something that comes up in discussions with readers about your stories?
I have
And
not had any native readers ask me questions about it.
okay,
I have had lots of non-native people say, "What's going on here? Is this real?" Or, they'll want to label it
magic realism.
superpower, magic realism, something. And I said, "No, this is life. This is life in Ojibwe country. This isn't any woo-woo magic something.
Right.
Um, and you know, Buffy St. Marie, she has a quote where she says, "You think I have visions because I'm an Indian. I have visions because there are visions to be seen." And I believe that's true of everybody, but the Western educational system wants people to kind of like have brains and take in information and spit out information instead of being whole beings with intuitive abilities. And so we dismiss our children's abilities from an early age.
Right.
Western
Right.
society. We're in native country, we don't do that.
Right. We know that those children are so close to there's this curtain, there's this filter that hasn't blocked their vision yet. And so they can see things and they can have conversations and say these things that just strike us as, wow, um, you know,
Mhm.
the distance between this world and the next is not a
There's
matter of
nothing.
distance.
Right.
It's not a matter of distance.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I get that. I get that. I get a lot of questions about the little people in my book. And so yeah, I completely get, I don't get those questions about the little people from Indigenous readers
That's yeah.
because
Yeah.
they know. And yeah. Hmm. Hmm. I do want to remind our viewers to purchase your copy of Firekeeper's Daughter straight from our host, Politics and Prose. In the chat, there is a link to them. Please support Politics and Prose. Thank you, Miigwech, so much. Okay, waiting for some more questions. And Marcie, so you're working on another Cash
Working on book 4. Yes.
book four. Okay.
And I have a children's book that will come out, I think it's in 2024 with Heart Drum about about ribbon skirts and grandmothers and granddaughters. And I'm working on a standalone contemporary novel.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure what the publication date on that one is, but I am working on book 4. This month of October is all seems to be, you know, signings and readings and conversations like this about Sinister Graves. And so I feel like I'm just getting like a paragraph written here, a paragraph written there, you know. Um, and I'm kind of used to, because of the way my life is set up, being able to just really sit down and crank out a few thousand words a day. Well, that's not happening right now.
I was going to ask about the process. I know that, you know, events such as this draw people who love writing and are maybe working on projects of their own. And I was going to ask about your writing process, if you have a particular time of day that feels especially creative, or if, you know, if it's different. My writing process for my first book was very different than writing on deadline for book number 2.
Hmm.
So yeah, that process can evolve. Please tell us about your writing process.
I'm was a mom with 3 daughters, you know, single parent. And so for most of my writing career, I've just had to write whenever I could write. And a
Mhm.
lot of that happens internally in my brain while I'm doing whatever, you know, doing dishes, doing laundry, driving somebody. I'm actually like off in a whole nother world. And so that when I sit down at the laptop, I can just write. I just write what's been working in my brain. What really works best for, so I try to write something every day. I try to work on whatever I'm working on every single day. Um, but what works best for me are writing retreats. And that
Mm.
started back in the 90s, where there was a retreat center in northern Minnesota, um, Norcroft Women's Writing Retreat. And I was gifted with a retreat, and I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. It was I was there for 3 weeks, got more written in 3 weeks than I'd gotten in 3 years. just because there was zero interruptions, zero expectations of, people grabbing at my attention. And so I still, it's why we wanted to do the retreat at your place.
Yeah.
It's like there's the space to just hear what's happening in your mind and get it out.
Mhm.
So those are the places where I'm the most productive. Otherwise, it's just what can I get done today? If I can do it in the morning, I do it in the morning. If it's 10 o'clock at night, I do it at 10 o'clock at night. Do you have a
Mhm.
regular process or a time that works
I
best?
did for my first book, but for my second, oh, it's a totally different cat. It's like you. It's whenever I have that time. I do quite a bit of speaking engagements,
Mhm.
and now with the foreign editions coming out,
Right.
traveling and that's such a fantastic opportunity, and I love every minute of it. But I felt like I got more writing done when I worked full time for the US Department of Education, and I was getting up at 4:30 in the morning to write from 5 a.m. to 8:15 a.m. every Monday through Friday before I would commute into DC for my day job. I felt like I was more productive because my time was so constrained, and
Hmm.
now it's different. I Some days I don't write. Some days I write 10 hours. It depends on my travel.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, and you know what, we are going to have to do our DIY
We
writers
are.
retreat where you come, listen to the waves of Lake Michigan, write all day, and then we cook dinner together and we will just sit and talk, watch the sunset over Lake Michigan. And for me, that's the thing, is because I live in this house, and for me, what I was so looking forward to were the conversations
Like,
that we
right.
would have about what we're
Electricity.
working on. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
okay, we're gonna have to do this.
Okay. All right. Well, then, so I know that you have traveled through most of COVID. I haven't.
Mhm,
You know, and I ended up with COVID at the beginning of July, and that took a real chunk
mhm.
out of my summer. Um,
Yeah,
but things have
well,
seemed to, they're opening up, and I do like Zoom. I do like this kind of opportune. There are more opportunities as so
right.
many things have gone online. I like this too.
There are some lessons, some good things that we have learned out of COVID. And one of those is access to information, access to events, access to authors, because not everyone can afford the $1,000 for a plane fare and hotel to go to Quayle. There are travel scholarships available, but it's still a considerable investment. And so I think that being able to have events that are hybrid, or virtual only, where it increases access to people who never would have been able to get to these events in person. And to me, increasing access for people with mobility issues, with other issues that where they're not comfortable in a public setting, even with masks. I
Right.
do appreciate that we're cognizant of that and have these opportunities. I'd like to thank Politics and Prose. We have another question, so I want to get to that. Thank you, Carol. How much research do you do for each book?
Oh dear, not much.
Oh,
I'm serious. Like I don't know how much research you did for your book,
oh, I
but
did.
did you? You did a lot?
I learned how to make meth from the Michigan State Police.
That's right. That's right.
I did a lot of research.
Um, there are things I dear. I think it goes back to the time frame of the story. There, there aren't cell phones. There's not DNA. There's not this whole scientific whatever that I need to know in order for the story to happen. Um, So my research has been like um, an editor wanting to know why the Red River Valley is so flat and having to like go back and look up, what I learned in grade school about Lake Agassiz and the glaciers moving across the Red River and, or going north, shaving the land flat. So that kind of research. And then there was one part in one of the books where I had a grain coming out of a grain auger. And when I
Mhm.
reread it, I realized that because I grew up in farm country, I realized it could never happen like that. Like whatever I had written just was, the grain was never going to get where it needed to go. And so I had to pull up a picture of a grain auger emptying grain. I mean, that kind of research. Um, I
I
don't know.
have to ask a question.
Yeah.
When I read Cash Blackbear, I
Hmm.
envision you as a young woman. Am I far off in, is there any part of Cash that draws upon?
They are not autobiographical.
Okay.
The thing I think that's important for people to know is this removal of Indian children from homes. So, like, at least here around where I live, everybody has some experience with this. And if they don't have an experience, they know close family where that experience has been. They grow up and then all of a sudden they have a sister show up from Seattle, like
Mhm.
that they didn't even know they had, but that the government had taken and shipped out to Seattle. Um, so it isn't like it's not autobiographical. And I've had so many native women say to me, "You've told my story." And I think it's just that back to the research, it's like my research, I think, is primarily about being aware of what's happening around me. And I'm a very like eavesdrop on people. I study things, I listen to things, it's like I'm always doing that kind of research as
Mhm.
opposed to,
Mhm.
looking something up in a book.
Right. Right.
I do shoot pool. That's the one thing that is,
Okay. I was going to ask that question. The thing about Cash, she travels with her pool cue,
yes.
and she's able to make rent many months because of how she cleans up at the pool
Yep.
table.
Yep.
And
I was never that
wow.
good, but
Hey, you know what? Creative license. She's
yeah.
spectacular. Um, yeah. Okay. Any last questions for Marcie? We have time for maybe one more question. Marcie, if you can give us any Auntie wisdom for any writers out there that have us these ideas for a story just kind of coming to them and they don't know what to do with it. Do you have any
I mean,
Auntie
what I
wisdom for
tell
them?
people to do is write. You have to write and you have to submit. And, like there's Yellow Medicine Review, which is a native um, chapbook, book that gets put out by the University of Minnesota down in Marshall, Minnesota. Yellow Medicine Review. You can just submit stories, you can submit poetry, and I think there's something about submitting things and taking that risk that's so important.
Mhm.
Um, so that's
Yeah.
my advice to people is to write, 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 write. Never throw anything that you write away. I know other people say
Right.
throw some stuff away, but I'm like, no, I've
Oh,
found total gems in a drawer someplace where like, oh, here's a story, here's a poem, here's a.
yes.
So I never throw any of my writing away. And
When I'm editing, I have a document called bits, and it's like a parking lot. I just throw, if it
yes,
doesn't work for this story, you know what, that
right,
writing was really beautiful. I'm going
yep,
to throw it in here because I don't know, someday
yes,
maybe. But
yep,
yeah, I don't ever get rid of something that's not working for this story. That
right,
doesn't mean it's not going to work for something else.
yep, yep. So write, submit to legitimate places. Like the Yellow Medicine Review it's been going forever. There's some other publications, which I'm not coming, they're not just jumping to my mind right now. But you can get like a string of like you get published. You have something that you can show an editor and an agent saying, here's where I've been published.
Right.
Because I started and I needed to make money because I had the 3 kids. When I started, I would only submit to things that paid. Like I didn't submit to Yellow Medicine Review because I didn't pay. They pay in copies. Um,
Right.
Now I submit all the time to them. I love the
Mhm.
publication. I think it's, great work. It's from Native people all around the country. And listen to other authors. I have a writing group. I'm always in a writers group or women's writing group. Um, don't be afraid to hear criticism, like not but a critique of your work. There's a
Feedback.
difference.
Yeah, a quality critique of your
Yeah,
work, the things that resonate with you. When you hear it, it's kind of like hearing a bell on a certain frequency.
yeah,
It rings true. And then for the things that don't ring true, leave it for someone else. It
yeah,
just, but I think if you listen, you do hear the critiques that land for
right.
you. Yeah, definitely. There's so many good free resources that are out there. Organizations like We Need Diverse Books
Yes.
and Quayle Literary Journal, podcasts and different things. So
Right.
there are more resources that are more accessible to aspiring writers than ever before. Um, Marcie, it's been such a pleasure. I want to remind our audience, uh, purchase your copy of Sinister Graves from our wonderful Politics and Prose. Chimagwech, big thank you for this. Um, and I'll turn this over to Morgan from Politics and Prose.
Oh, thank you. Before we go, number one, I wanted to say I have read Sinister Graves and Murder on the Red River. I meant to mention that in the green room. I can vouch for these books. I should finish Girl Gone Missing or start it, definitely finish it within the next month. I am enjoying the series thoroughly. And before we go, I would love to hear what you both are currently reading.
Erica T. Worth, her book White Horse, another story set in the 70s. I'm
Nice.
on the kick. Erica T. Worth, she wrote a book called Crazy Horse's Girlfriend, and I believe the first chapter of that novel needs to be taught in every creative writing course.
Mm.
It is a masterclass in voice.
Hmm. Well, I couldn't find the book, and then I was like scrambling around to find the book. It's not a book; it's an arc. Gabriel, and I don't want to mispronounce the name. Gabriel Valjean. Um, and the book is Liar's Dice. It's one that's in the process of coming out.
Right. So
Um,
an ARC is an advanced reader copy
yes.
that sometimes, this is like the best perk about being an author, is that sometimes you get to read these sneak previews of these stories coming out. And so, yes. So the story by, what was
Gabriel
his name?
Valjean, and
Valdon.
what I've read so far. It sounds like a movie talking. It's like, oh,
Mhm.
these are like a crime movie. That's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. I'm also really big on I'm the Girl by Courtney Summers. She's one of
Mhm.
my favorite authors of all time. Her book just came out this month. And so, yes, so many good stories out there. And just, if you're a reader, please take a moment to rate, review, recommend. It means all the difference to an author out there. Marcie and I can attest to that.
The other one, Shudder by Ramona Emerson. She's a Dene writer, and yeah, that's a like yeah, my kids love the stories because it reminds them of some of these things that we were talking about this other world that exists right along with us.
Nice. Those all sound like great recommendations, and many of them I definitely know you can pick up at Politics and Prose.
All right.
Marcie, Angeline, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for doing this event with us. And on the behalf of Politics and Prose, to our audience, thank you for joining us again. Thank you for sharing your Friday night with us. And take care and stay well read, everyone.
All right.
Pete.
Thank you all for coming.
Yeah.
Bye.